My son asked me the other day, do you even lift, bro? My God, this kid. Actually, he is getting pretty jacked. Plus, he's taking Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. No joke. I'm a little bit scared of him. Anyway, he's on this pretty intense weightlifting regimen, and some YouTuber recommended a post-workout protein shake. Oh my God. I saw him drinking this thing, and I slapped it right out of his hand. Well, once I regained consciousness, and he apologized for choking me out, I told him about Magic Spoon. That's right, Magic Spoon. 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net grams of carbs in each serving, which, by the way, is only 140 calories. It's keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and low-carb, and so much more fun than a damn protein shake after a workout. And hey, you can build your own custom bundle with flavors like cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter, cookies and cream, maple waffle, blueberry, cinnamon, plus the newly reformulated honey nut flavor that will now be added to Magic Spoon's permanent collection. I didn't even know they were trying it out, but now it's permanent. Honey nut. Awesome. So go grab yourself a custom bundle of cereal and be sure to use our promo code NODUNKS at checkout to save $5 off your order. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it, for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember, get your next delicious bowl of guilt-free cereal at magicspoon.com/NoDunks and use code NODUNKS for $5 off. Magic Spoon, thank you for sponsoring this episode.
Away we ayo. Welcome to No Breaks, a Formula One podcast from the No Dunks Inc. Classic Factory, proudly a part of the Athletic Podcast Network. I'm your host, Trey Kirby. We've got our local F1 expert, Graydon Gordian, alongside me. JD making the magic happen over here in the paddock. And we are very excited to introduce our special guest today and our first official guest, Graydon. She's a writer for The Drive and racefans.net, one of my favorite follows on Formula One Twitter. Hazel Southwell. Hazel, thank you so much for joining us.
To be doing this.
Well, I hope you like pumpernickel toast. That was going to be my first question for you. We saw Toto order it like 100 times during Drive to Survive Season 4. Have you been itching for pumpernickel since Netflix dropped Season 4?
So I have to admit, I actually didn't know what pumpernickel toast was when I first saw Toto ordering it. But I did actually eat some the other day, and it is pretty good.
Okay.
I can see.
I think that's among the four of us. I think that's 2 votes for pumpernickel, 2 against. I think JD and I are officially pumpernickel cynics, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they were
100% for me.
Yeah, I'm still willing to order it because I'm like you. Like I saw Toto and I was like, I gotta see. It's been 20 years. So Graydon tracked us down some last week. We had 1 bite each, and that seemed to be enough before recording a podcast.
1 was plenty.
But you said you didn't know much about pumpernickel toast. Something I didn't know much about until watching Drive to Survive was Milton Keynes. I think it's Byron Buxton who says, even people who live in Milton Keynes don't want to live in Milton Keynes. Hazel, I think you grew up nearby. Is Milton Keynes really all that bad?
So I kind of grew up near Milton Keynes. I grew up near an equally deserving of its reputation town called Reading. But Milton Keynes is kind of like not that far away. The thing about Milton Keynes is it was built deliberately as like a new town. It was like a sort of development that was made deliberately, not very well. So well, there's a lot of people who like it, and lots of people who live there, some of whom got in touch with me on Twitter after I tweeted a joke about this, are quite keen to defend Milton Keynes. So I should say that some people do want to live there.
Which, if you had to live in any of that, there are so many teams based in like that part of England. Which of them would you want to live closest to? Like, what is the nicest of those towns? I don't think Trey or I have ever been to that part of England. So I don't like, what is the nicest of those? The McLaren facility looks very nice, but is that a nice area? I don't even know.
I was going to say I'd probably go for Woking.
Okay.
Woking. It's fairly, if you've got to be in like a relatively small town, it's like fairly well appointed. There's a lot of fast trains to London and stuff. And it's not crazily expensive because like, say like Williams are near Oxford, but then you're shelling out if you're going to live there. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Understood. Makes sense.
Yeah, I see where Williams is falling short a little bit here. They're spending all of their money on rent, it sounds like, rather than actually just being able to improve their car.
Yeah,
real estate is expensive.
For me, I feel like I go with one of the Italian teams, though. Like if I got to, I'm in Maranello. So yeah, I'm a homer, but I feel like that's, I mean, it seems nice. That's, I think Yuki would agree with me. The food is probably better.
Yeah, he didn't seem to be the biggest fan of the Milton Keynes food. So that's the most boring place on earth, but he certainly loves the roundabouts. No speed limit on the roundabouts. Go as fast as you possibly can.
I respect the roundabout. That's a very smart way of structuring traffic. It's much better than most American like intersections. I fully believe that. The metric system,
I'm pro roundabouts
system, roundabouts, these are huge improvements over our way of doing things. I mean, I just fully believe that. So All right.
Quite the dramatic weekend for Formula One. We'll get into the race here. We're going to take you through all of it, starting with Friday, when a missile was launched and hit the Aramco oil facility that's about 10 kilometers from the track in Jeddah. This led to a 4-hour meeting after the session. Drivers and teams, a discussion late into the night about the safety of holding a Grand Prix in Saudi Arabia, really, before ultimately deciding they're going to race and getting assurances that they weren't in any sort of danger for the remainder of the weekend. Y'all have obviously been watching F1 a lot longer than I am. Has there been any sort of, real world events that hang over a Formula One weekend like this did?
I mean, there have been controversies in various nations, maybe criticisms of maybe attending a race. But Hazel, tell me if I'm wrong. I can't remember anything even close to a missile attack like that you could see from the track. That I have nothing that I could possibly compare to this. And listen, I am so happy that the race weekend went fine from there and that there was no further incidents. Of course, that's what we were all hoping for. But I won't lie. At the time, I thought to myself, they absolutely need to cancel this race. Possible? I thought it was crazy to go forward with it. It's easy to say in hindsight that, of course, everything is fine because everything ended up being just fine, thank God. But I thought it was a bit of a mistake to move forward. Certainly, had anything else happened, the ramifications would have been awful. Luckily, nothing else did. But I think you have to certainly question, whether I think it's just another layer and something I'm sure we'll discuss here in a moment, which is, already there was a lot of criticisms or questions as to whether we should be racing in Saudi Arabia. It seems like yet just another drop in that bucket as far as whether or not we should even be in Jeddah racing. Hazel, did you feel similarly?
So I'm like quite I don't want to say unique, but I guess an unusual person to be speaking about this because I go to Saudi Arabia for Formula E. And when we were there in early 2021, there was an intercepted missile strike that was allegedly headed towards Riyadh. That led to the airspace closing over Riyadh and a lot of people ending up stuck in the airport for up to nearly 2 days. And a lot of us ending up stuck there whilst all our visas were expiring. And like Saudi Arabia, it's not the most comfortable country to realize that you're in illegally and things.
Sure, fair.
So it's not really like the most ideal situation. So there was kind of, I guess, previous to this in that incident. On the other hand, not only did it not hit any target anywhere near the E-Prix, but I've never been 100% convinced that wasn't like at least somewhat pantomimed by the authorities, because there is a desire in Saudi Arabia to be perceived as threatened, or politically there is a desire from the Saudi Arabian government for the Houthi threat to be believed to be very, very credible and very dangerous to justify the war in Yemen. which it's the 7th anniversary of the start of the Saudi bombardment of Yemen last weekend. So some coincidental timing, and it would have been reasonable to expect that there could well have been an escalation from the point at which these initial strikes happened. I mean, should you race next to a burning oil refinery? Probably not. Like, you know,
when you put it that way.
I mean, yeah, that's okay. So I have a question. But you've been to Saudi Arabia, then you've attended races there. You know, what is that experience like? We have friends who've traveled to Saudi Arabia. I don't believe either Trey or I have, but have been there for work and other things. And, you know, people have, it does seem as if the process of getting into the country can be a little bit intense, but also people have found that people to be very warm and friendly. Like, what's been your experience actually on the ground there attending a race? I know it's Formula E. It's a little different, but I got to imagine the Venn diagram has a decent amount of overlap. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think actually Formula One have a way more tight ecosystem for journalists when they're attending. Formula E basically let me kind of just wander off on my own. But it seems like there's kind of like specific media hotels and there does seem to be a sort of a slightly different approach taken by Formula One with regards to how people attend. But there's also a much larger number of people turning up to that. So it is a different event. But yeah, for me, I mean, the country has changed very, very dramatically since I started going in 2018. In 2018, it felt like walking around somewhere in lockdown, like very few people in the streets, very little going on, not much open. And now when I went back this January, it was a really different experience. Like Riyadh is really buzzy. It's full of barbecue smokehouses, like they've really gone in on barbecue as a trend. And like it's very obvious that there is like a much more open society, or at least because the law had basically prevented people from socializing or even gathering in groups for a long time, that element is significantly changed, and the Saudis are now able to congregate. They're able to go to the cinema, they're able to go to concerts and sporting events, and that has had a very significant effect. Saudi Arabians are super friendly. They're all of the ones who I've met have been very warm and kind. I now have quite a few Saudi friends, and I would have said that the thing about Riyadh when I first went there was that it was boring more than anything else, because this is not really anything to do or see or kind of, because there was this sort of intense lockdown-like prevention of any form of social life or social sphere. And now it's like, well, it's sort of the only... Well, not the only thing that strikes you. There's still lots of differences between Riyadh and a lot of places, but at the same time, it's not. I'm never quite sure what people imagine when they think about Saudi Arabia, but it's not kind of like.
It's maybe not as foreign. I think people, it's very other. Like people think it is just radically different. It's maybe getting a little bit more recognizable to someone like us. Well. Interesting. So nonetheless, though, despite, Hazel, your suggestion that we not have a race within a few miles of a burning oil refinery.
We did indeed.
I believe we did.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, a very exciting qualifying session on the Saturday, unless you are Lewis Hamilton, because the big shock in this one is Hamilton in the Mercedes qualifying 16th out after Q1 because of performance for the first time, I think, since 2009, Graydon. I think we were both living in Chicago still at that point in 2009. Hazel, any idea what was going wrong with Mercedes and Lewis in qualifying? Because that was crazy to see him struggling so much, especially compared to George Russell, who did perfectly fine.
So this is interesting. I was just working on something earlier today about with some quotes that Russell gave after the race, where he said that he and Lewis had gone in opposite directions, essentially, with the car setup. Now, you could argue the reason they did that is because Mercedes are really in trouble at the moment, and so they're just kind of sending them in opposite directions to see which one works, to get a better steer on it. But I think it was each driver's choice. Also, it's not like the team picked. Lewis said that he got the setup wrong. They made the car significantly worse for qualifying, and particularly with this porpoising problem that's affecting Mercedes more than any of the other teams.
Yeah, I think Russell said that he thinks like 99% of their performance problems are coming from porpoising, and I know you usually like to explain it with cheese, Hazel, but it does seem to seriously still be a problem for Mercedes, and I thought it was crazy. Wrong.
It does feel whatever, but in actuality, the amount of small choices that they're able to make week in, week out to optimize for any given track, and the speed of the corners, the amount of straights, whatever sort of setup that they want. I think the gap that you saw between Russell and Hamilton in qualifying is, while unfortunate for Hamilton, is a really interesting example of just how much variety you can have even around the same fundamental platform of one car. So I think it shows just how many small decisions are made week in, week out by these teams also, and the ramifications of them, which are huge.
So what do you think, Hazel? Is it possible to... I mean, Mercedes looked a little bit better, definitely in the Grand Prix. Hamilton's car seemed to be more on par with Russell's. Is this something that they can figure out in, the coming weeks to get ready for the Australian Grand Prix?
I think it's going to be an interesting one. I mean, when you look at the Mercedes-powered teams, they're broadly in trouble. And I think... but I think that might be kind of disguising the issue. I think Williams and Aston Martin being in trouble isn't necessarily all that surprising. And then because they weren't front runners last year, so struggling to reinterpret the new regulations maybe isn't very surprising. And then when you look at McLaren and Mercedes, they have basically opposite problems. So McLaren have effectively stopped their car porpoising, but have no downforce. And Mercedes have way too much downforce, and their car is porpoising out of control. Somewhere between the two, there's a good car. Do I think the Mercedes factory team are going to be able to turn that around faster than McLaren? Yes. Whether they're going to be able to do it by Melbourne, I don't know. Because I think if this was going to be a quick fix, then they would have done it. Because it kind of... Mercedes had a really messy time, both preseason tests, and it just doesn't seem to be going away.
Do you think that they have the ability to fix it by the end of the season? Like, do you expect that, when we're at the second half of the season, post summer break, whatever, they'll be back fighting for podiums, back fighting for the top step? It might be too late for them to be back in the title race at that point, but do you expect them to be competitive with Red Bull and Ferrari come the end of the year?
It really depends on whether they can get this porpoising under control. And it sounds ridiculous to be just saying that and to keep repeating this porpoising problem, but it really is that they can't get the car into anything like a workable window until they stop the porpoising. It depends when they get that under control. Then they can start looking at the other competitive elements and bringing upgrades that will bring them quicker and get them to a place with Ferrari and Red Bull. But Ferrari and Red Bull are also going to be developing their car. This isn't going to be like last year where a lot of the teams kind of went like, we have to stop this. We've got to look to 2022 halfway through the season. And some teams continued. Because Mercedes gave up quite early on developing their 2021 car. And then looked forward to this car in aiming to give themselves more time to make this one really good. Yeah, I think they're in for a tough one. On the other hand, they are a very good team. They have exceptionally good people. I'm sure that if anyone can turn it around in a quick way and quick enough to get back into the title fight, then it's them. And Red Bull and Ferrari comparatively do have relative history for choking. development-wise, or
That was nice.
Not-
that was very
not quite making it.
kind way to put it.
Yeah. I love that.
A relative propensity.
Yeah.
So as long as Red Bull and Ferrari stop working on their cars and Mercedes gets on the phone with McLaren to see what they're doing, it sounds like Mercedes should be able to turn this around right away. Not great for the Silver Arrows to start. Not great to be doing A/B testing with your cars and to be doing like road tests during the Grand Prix.
Suboptimal.
If you ask me. But not the only bit of drama from qualifying. In Q2, Mick Schumacher, big time crash at turn 12. Went basically straight into the barriers. I think they estimated it at 33 Gs of force. Turned out to be $1 million in damages. Schumacher went to the hospital, no injuries, but did not race on Sunday. I was surprised during the broadcast that they kept saying that they weren't expecting a crash where it happened. So Hazel, kind of what happened with that Schumacher crash, and why was it such a big deal that he crashed where he did, and why are there no barriers in that sort of place? He was like straight into cement. That was scary.
Yeah, I mean, so it's exactly the same place where there was a very violent crash during the Formula 2, the kind of junior series of Formula 1, earlier in the weekend when Chen Bolak-Bassi basically had exactly the same crash. It's a very high speed part of the track around that turn. It's basically F1 cars should probably not be racing at speeds as immense as the Jeddah track supports next to concrete barriers. You have to have the concrete barriers there because you have to stop them because it's a street track. And otherwise they're going to be hitting all kinds of stuff. Well, I mean, Jeddah's barely a street track, but in theory it is. And so, when we think about street tracks, we think about something like Monaco, like Singapore, both of which are relatively low-speed circuits. Jeddah is one of the fastest circuits on the entire calendar. It's comparable to Monza. And when you think about that, then it's like, well, these crashes will be immeasurably violent because they're going into barriers that are not intended to deal with those speeds. These are intended for relatively slow-speed circuits. Working in Formula E, like the barriers are very, very close on E-Prix circuits. They're all street tracks and they do hit them a lot, but you don't see that level of disruption because they're not going 170 miles per hour at the time. I mean, you do still see very violent crashes and I don't want to lessen that or to lessen the danger, but I mean, I feel that we were very lucky not to see severe injuries on Mick. He was very lucky to escape a concussion. Chen Bolak-Bassi, the Formula 2 racer who crashed like that, did get a concussion. He only didn't race on the Sunday because Haas knew that they couldn't rebuild his car. But I think there's got to be a conversation about there being part of the track that is, or any part of a track that is that hazardous. And let's face it, most of the track in Jeddah is that hazardous. So
yeah, it seems like that was
quite uncomfortable viewing.
Yeah, last season
Definitely.
before we even raced there for the first time, I mean, we hadn't even seen cars on the track, and there was already a lot of anxieties around the speed, of the track, how narrow it is. Which I think there's even instances where they made it slightly wider, but I don't know that that makes a huge difference. I don't know. I feel like this is going to be an annual conversation. Just to be frank, I don't think there's any likelihood that even with all these things coming together, we're not going back to Jeddah. Like, they have a very long contract there. They, Aramco is the lead sponsor of F1. We're going to be going back to this track repeatedly. And I think this is just a thing. We'll just have Hazel back next year at this time, and we'll just talk how we can have this exact same conversation again, because I honestly think these sorts of crashes are going to happen. They're going to happen again and again and again. And my hope is that it's just maybe we can see small improvements in the track that decrease the likelihood. Hopefully we get out of most of these weekends with it. But I do think this is just the nature of such a narrow, high-speed track as Jeddah. I don't see it. To me, in order for it to be better, you'd have to change the whole track setup really radically. which I don't know if they intend to do or are even thinking.
Well, they just
of
built
doing.
it, right? I mean,
Yeah,
they've
they
only
just
been
built
racing there
right.
for 2 years, so it does
Exactly.
seem quite likely that they wouldn't change the track dramatically right away. But I mean, if there's going to be scary crashes at the same place, they got to at least add to the barriers or something along those lines. Or here's another thing they could change. I thought it was very odd that they couldn't communicate with Schumacher at all, and they eventually went on to explain that with the way the cars are built now, they're kind of like supposed to split in half a little bit. But unfortunately, the communication part is in like the back part of the chassis, which just makes it extra scary when you see a huge crash and then you're not hearing anything back. We didn't know at the time. That's just kind of the way the cars are built. But it seems like they should maybe think about the ways the cars are built so you can talk to your driver after a big crash.
That was a scary few moments there, no doubt. You know, that period afterwards where there was no news. No news in that context seems like bad news.
Just want to hear I'm okay.
That no news seems like bad news at those times. So luckily he was fine and
back at the track the next day.
Back at the track the next day.
And there was a little good news in qualifying. We had a great battle for pole position during Q3. I think Carlos Sainz had qualified P1 after Q2. He put down another provisional pole during Q3. One-upped by his man Charles Leclerc, though, put up his own provisional pole by about 1/10 of a second over his teammate, only to be beaten out for P1 by a Red Bull driven by Sergio Perez, taking home the first pole of his career, also the first pole position by a Mexican driver. Hazel, what'd you think when Sergio Perez took home a pole position?
I think it's almost kind of offensive to Perez that we're also surprised. But I think, because he is a very fast driver, but typically he hasn't always been that great at qualifying, and he's quite often been beaten in like qualifying battles in terms of which comes out ahead by his teammates. He's very good in races. He's very good as a racer. But yeah, like typically has not been someone who would put in that kind of lap. And he said at the time, if he drove 1,000 laps, then he would never put a lap like that together again. And I guess it's just one of those things where it's like a driver really hooks it up. And it was pole by a huge margin as well.
Yeah, big time.
So yeah, I mean, nothing but respect for that. It was an incredible lap.
As our leading Charles Leclerc stan, I was pretty confident he was getting pole after that lap. I saw the time. I thought, gosh, that was quick. We're looking good here. And not to mention that coming out of, I think if you saw which the infographics seemed to actually kind of be working this week, coming out of the first sector, Perez was way down on him. He was still like, a third of a second down or something. He made up a ton of time over the back half of the lap. Absolutely hooked it up. I don't know. It was awesome. It was cool. And I loved to see it. I wish the race had gone a little better for our man Checo, but
bad timing.
But at least Saturday was awesome for him. And my hope is that this is a season where I'm sure as it evolves, Verstappen will be very obviously the A player for that team and will be the guy that they're positioning to win the title. But my hope is that it can be a little bit more equitable, and there's a few more instances where Checo can maybe be on the top step. A little bit more of a. He's less of a supporting role than he was last year. I imagine as the season goes on, he'll become more and more that, but I'd love to see him get some more race wins under his belt. He deserves it, deserves the recognition. So.
Yeah, I like to see Perez up on top. I thought it was very funny to hear like the buzz, like will Red Bull switch Verstappen and Perez? I'm like, we're on the race 2. Like Max is going to make it up over the course of the season. We don't need to be shifting him up into P1 here. Right away. Nonetheless, Sunday race day, 50 laps in Jeddah, but only 18 drivers. Schumacher held out with his car severely damaged, and Yuki Tsunoda wasn't able to start due to drivetrain issues. We've seen a lot of problems with Red Bull engines to start the season. Hazel, is this something that they're going to need to continue to worry about? AlphaTauri's just not finishing these races? Starting these races?
Yeah, well, yeah, not even starting. That's a pretty bad kind of situation to find yourself in. I think, it seems like Mercedes have made a pretty reliable power unit that maybe doesn't go very fast. And the other two have maybe found a different balance, because we've also seen a couple of Ferraris not on the factory team cars but on the Alfa Romeo, that hasn't had like a great time. Bottas retired with overheating in Jeddah, and yeah, there does seem to be a reliability issue with the Red Bull powertrains power unit. And although it's been different things every time, so it seems like it's been MGUK on both of the Alpha Tauris, or at least something to do with the hybrid system. And then on the two Red Bulls, it was the lift pump, which is one of several pumps in the fuel system for a Formula One car, which is actually a generic part that all cars use. So,
can I ask you a question, Hazel? Because you are much more knowledgeable about powertrains than I am in general. I'm going to flash forward. We'll cover the start of the race. We'll cover the first safety car, but I want to flash forward to kind of somewhere in the 30-somethings laps. We see a slew of cars kind of suddenly retire, right? Like
Alonso lap 36, Ricciardo lap 37, and then you said Bottas also retired with overheating.
Interestingly enough, I guess actually three different engines. You know, the Renault, the Mercedes, and the Ferrari powered engines, and then we saw, I guess, Yuki didn't even make it on the track. But what is that? Is that a heating? Is that an overheating issue? Is that a byproduct, Hazel, of driving in these in the conditions there? Like, what is, or were they all unrelated issues? Like, why did we see so many failures and then like all at the exact same moment, which seemed like an odd coincidence?
So with the two that were overheating with Bottas and Alonso, I think you can probably attribute something about the rhythm of the race, like the way that pit stops and the safety car and things had taken place. Where you see overheating on F1 car, it sounds a bit backwards to say they overheat behind the safety car, because you're thinking like, well, they're going slower, why would they be overheating then? But of course, actually, all of the cooling on an F1 car, because it's not like it's got aircon or whatever, is to do with like airflow over the car. So all of the ways the brakes are cooled, like if you think about the brake ducts, there's these like kind of enormous funnels and stuff that you see on the cars, and yeah, all of the cooling of the power unit, all of the cooling within the car is entirely dependent on it being able to go at speeds that you would expect an F1 car to go, because that's how it's meant to work. So when they have a long time behind the safety car, especially when they're between walls, so there's not a lot of kind of like ambient airflow, there's no breeze really, and there's not when you're in somewhere like Jeddah, which is pretty warm and quite humid, then you will see overheating. So I think both of those, I wouldn't be able to say like specifically what overheated on each of them, because obviously the teams try and keep that pretty quiet. But whatever the overheating problems were, it was probably to do with the rhythm of the race to some extent, and also to do with these new aerodynamics, to do with the fact that teams are sort of trying new stuff with their cars and the way that airflow works. Ricciardo, it seemed like a strange work. It seemed like it was a clutch issue, it's sort of gearbox failure.
Got it.
So it's sort of hard to say whether that could also have been overheating, or it could just have been a mechanical. The team said it was mechanical, so I think although they all happened within a very short space of time, and it's probably all of them ultimately are attributable to stresses on the car that were caused by the way the race had unfolded. But I don't think there's necessarily like any particularly unifying factor. I think if you're going to look at any kind of like pattern between the way that have been retirements, and we probably will see a lot of retirements over the course of the season for reliability issues in a way that we haven't previously, or we haven't for a few years, if you think back to the start of the hybrid era, when the full turbo hybrid systems were introduced, there were a lot of reliability related retirements. You'd see multiple drivers per race having their cars fail. And just in the last couple of years, maybe the last 2-3 years, that's really almost stopped. You very rarely see drivers, or certainly last year, you relatively rarely saw drivers with problems like that on the car, basically because the teams understood their cars incredibly well by that point. And because the regulations have been stable for quite a long time, they weren't essentially having to like run on the real edges of something that they didn't necessarily fully understand how to make it as efficient as possible, to make it as reliable as possible for a race. So yeah, I think we will see quite a lot of it.
Yeah, one of a million things it seems like all these teams are going to have to figure out, but I'll be interested to see who's the first Formula One car to put in air conditioning, because that might be the key there to overheating. Nice. Just throw in an air conditioner. Nice. Nobody's going to complain. I don't know if it'll slow you down.
Luxury, right?
Yeah, yeah. The Ferrari should definitely do it. Yeah. All the bells and whistles. But there was a lot of really fun moments in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. We had some great battles between the two Alpines early on. We had some safety cars that really changed things up with the timing of when they were coming in and when the pit windows were open. In the end, we had Max Verstappen taking the win over Charles Leclerc in second, Carlos Sainz in P3. Hazel, did you have a favorite moment from the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix?
For me, it's got to be the in the early stage of the race. It really didn't look like we were necessarily on for a thriller. Let's put it that way. Apart from Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso decided to put on the show.
It was so cool.
Yeah, single-handedly. I don't know if they'd been told that they weren't getting paid next week if they didn't make sure BWT got enough airtime. But yeah, it was a very good day to be an Alpine sponsor.
And it seems like that was between that and then the battle that we had with Leclerc and Verstappen at the very end of the race. It does feel like we have reached a point where if you have two equally matched cars, they can go at it lap after lap after lap. Whereas I do feel like in previous seasons, it really, I mean, I'm being a little too cynical when I say this, but it's oftentimes it was basically about tire degradation and were you able to catch up and pass somebody as their tires were like quickly approaching a cliff? Had you synced that up right? In this instance, it's not that tire strategy isn't important, but it doesn't seem like also, unless somebody is severely disadvantaged on the tires, that's the main way you go about, you know, using DRS to pass them and then just off into the distance you go. You know, here it feels like we can have these extended battles, and honestly, Alpine might have battled for longer had Bottas not been right behind them and had they had to tell them to cool, to cool it and focus on the fact that they were, that they were going to get overtaken by another team, right? So I don't know. It just seems to me like it's not perfect, and even post-race, a lot of the guys talked about how DRS is still a necessity for overtaking and things like that, but it does feel like we are inching towards a more competitive, more exciting form of racing where we are better optimized for on-track battles. That was the whole goal of this, and I'm not saying it's like mission accomplished, but like we're getting there, and it's good. It's exciting.
Yeah, it definitely felt like in previous seasons you had one chance. Like one chance to make the move happen. If you get it done, you probably get it done for the rest of the race. This, like Ocon versus Alonso, this was like multiple laps where they're going back and forth through multiple corners to the point where they eventually had to get Otmar on the radio, and they're like, "You're sure you're okay with this?" They asked him like 100 times. He's like, "It's all right. They're not going to crash into each other." And then by lap 20, wherever they're at, they just got to stay there. I thought that was a perfect way to play it.
I love Otmar.
Yeah, I thought
that was really interesting because I think the team actually. So I know we were all like, "Oh my God, you've got to stop them! Like, why is Otmar being like, hey, this is cool?" But this is really valuable data for the team about the way that their car behaves when it's following another car, and the way that they can exploit the way that works and improve the car. So actually. For something that was relatively harmless, and you have to assume that your drivers are not going to crash each other out. Dangerous assumption, but still. And also where you're not going to lose any places because it's just teammates exchanging places. Really, really useful piece of like data gathering for the team there. So I think that was probably Although it looked kind of crazy that they were letting them race, it's a really useful thing.
Are you telling me Otmar wasn't putting the fans first, but there was an ulterior motive here?
No way, come on.
Because I had thought that he was just
show?
doing me a solid. Because at the time, you're right, the race was fairly boring for like the first 40 odd laps. Other than that,
that was the highlight, no doubt. But then we got some more drama a little bit later on. Lap 15, Charles Leclerc is on the radio, and you hear from his pit lane, box to overtake. He's currently running in P2. Perez hears that though. He says, "All right, I'm going to go in first." Leclerc stays out, but then instantly Nicholas Latifi crashes. A virtual safety car becomes a safety car. And suddenly Perez's race or chance at the podium is basically over. I thought that was incredible, especially to hear Leclerc explain it afterwards. He's like, yeah, we were completely faking him out on the radio there. I didn't know that they did that in Formula One, like messing with the other teams over the intercoms.
Yeah, I mean, they probably, were feigning as if it's do the opposite of whatever Perez does.
Sure.
But in actuality, I think that Red Bull really does not like to get undercut. In fact, they wildly favor the undercut, right? They like to change tires early, and I think be on the fresher tires early in a race. And then, too, I think the Ferrari thought it had pace that it was losing and wanted clean air in front of them. So I do think that, everything that happened with Latifi was just icing on the cake for them and happened to solidify it. But I think they got the outcome they wanted, which was Perez to go into the pits. I think that is what they were hoping for. Had Perez stayed out, would they have pitted? I mean, I don't know. Hey, Hazel, what you think? I feel like the answer is probably yes. I mean, because it seems like they were not in a good position to overtake. You had to try something, but that is the outcome I think they were hoping for, is what happened.
Yeah, for sure. I think that they decided to see if they could do the fake, and they could. And it obviously proved then turbo disastrous for Perez because of the safety car. But I think if that hadn't worked, then they would have had to pit because that would have been their only choice. The Ferrari clearly did not have the same pace as the Red Bull down the straights, and Jeddah is nearly all straights. So, or wiggles at least.
Yeah, wiggles. I think that's fair. Wiggles and a couple of hairpins at the ends.
Yeah.
So that was a big battle in the middle of the race, but the climactic battle really begins about lap 42 after a virtual safety car restart. Leclerc is in P1, Verstappen in P2. He's doing his classic thing where he likes to get right up next to you. How far can they take that? Could they go 3 wide? Like if Sainz is like, fine, you're messing with my guy, I'm messing with your guy. I'm getting up here.
I don't know. How far can you take that? I don't know if that track's wide enough to get 3 wide,
not.
So I don't. Verstappen has made that his calling card.
That is
now a constant thing he is doing.
He's going to be
did that
next
a couple times in the past. Now it's an every time thing.
They eventually restart, though. Verstappen passes Leclerc with DRS. Leclerc gets him back with DRS. Leclerc basically stretches out his lead through the curves, the wiggles, if you will. Hazel, Verstappen comes back during the straights. They eventually both lock up during a turn. But on lap 47, Verstappen finally changes his approach. He goes for the second DRS zone for the overtake, makes it stick, and he holds on to the win, even though there were some double yellow flags on the last lap that were a little confusing to me, trying to see what was going on there. Hazel, what do you think about Verstappen versus Leclerc round 2 here?
I think, what we saw was some very clever racing. The way that they were swapping the DRS between them was them both showing off basically how technically good they are as racers. And I think that's it's impressive to see, especially in the final laps of a really exhausting race. If you saw the drivers afterwards, they were running with sweat and all of them looked absolutely dead on their feet. And exhaustion is a real thing, both mental and physical, over the distance of a Grand Prix, especially between very tight walls on a street circuit. To see them doing that in the final laps was pretty impressive. I mean, I know a lot of people are saying, oh, it's very different to when Max was racing Lewis last year. And that, they were taking more risks, that it felt more like they might crash each other out, whereas Verstappen and Leclerc are being sort of relatively respectful. I think we also have to consider that these are very different cars.
It's different cars. What do you mean by that? I was going to say it's early. My running theory of this has been is everybody's talking about how respectful they are right now, but let's see
wave to each other.
Let's see how respectful this is if we're tight if we're separated by a few points with just a couple of races left. Let's see how much everybody is like congratulating one another. But why would the cars be the reason that you might be less, a little bit less elbows out there?
So I know we've mentioned this a couple of times already in this discussion, but the cars can follow much closer to each other,
right?
Without it being like super forced. So you're not having to make those moves. If you overtake each other, it doesn't have to be like a really tough dive. It doesn't have to be incredibly close.
Makes sense.
So yeah, I think it's probably a bit more possible to kind of leave those gaps because you're not having to make quite such a, I don't want to say desperate, but like not quite such a risky move in order to be able to make an overtake. And I also think another factor is that the drivers are leaving margin at the moment. Mm-hmm. They've got really reduced visibility over the front of the car because of the 18-inch wheels. So they've had like a substantial amount of their field of vision taken out. And also the kind of the mud flaps kind of
right.
the wheel covers that are over them. So they are leaving relative margin because they don't know where the other guy's front wing is. So they could be running themselves into a puncture otherwise.
That's a great point, because they were even talking about like as Hamilton was like making his way back through the field, they're like, I'm surprised they're giving him so much space. Maybe that's why. Just still getting used to the cars. This is the second race with a completely new car that everybody's driving, but it ends up being 1-1 Verstappen and Hamilton, and maybe that's the way it would have gone with the way the tracks are set up. Your top 10 in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix goes like this: Verstappen, Leclerc, Sainz in P3, Perez in P4, George Russell, the number 1 Mercedes, at 5th, Ocon in 6th, Norris in 7th, followed by Gasly, Magnussen, and Lewis Hamilton down in 10th. Had to ask his radio, they give points for 10th place? Couldn't even believe he was all the way down there, and he was honestly a little bit lucky to finish in 10th, because at that second safety car, I was just missing the pit window like every single time. I guess Magnussen and Hülkenberg were able to get in right away. I wasn't sure why Hamilton wasn't. Maybe he's just in the wrong part of the track, but by the time he came around, it was shut down, and just had to deal with 10th.
Yeah, I think he skirted on box. I think when they told him to box, I think he had just passed, and he was on the main straight. And then I think by the time he got back around, I may be misremembering, but Alonso had actually pulled over in the pit straight. So at that point, they had closed the pit entry, the timing there, again, just terrible for him. I actually, at that point, I was fairly confident that was the end of his chance at points, at getting some points on Sunday. I was pretty impressed that he managed to work his way back into 10th, to be quite honest.
So that's the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Hazel, wanted to ask you, if you were able to vote for 3 drivers of the day, what's your rankings going for Sunday's race?
I think we've got to give Gasly some credit, for sure, especially because he said he was in enormous amounts of pain for the last 15 laps and like screaming in his helmet. He felt like he was being stabbed. So the fact that he held on and he managed to take 8th, I think is pretty impressive. I think it's interesting because I'm always a bit reluctant to like reward the podium system.
Sure.
They already got rewarded.
Maybe an Ocon. I thought he had a nice race.
Yeah,
nice race.
Ocon had a really good race. And I also think Norris did pretty well to drag that McLaren into 7th. It's not a good car.
Definite bounce back week, sort of, for McLaren, at least looking competitive.
Yeah, I like those choices. I think Gasly, Ocon, Norris, all great picks. Honestly, the other person who I would mention here just is Russell. I know we've talked about his setup, but like clearly the Mercedes isn't there with the Ferraris and the Red Bulls, but I feel like he just did like a very nice, solid job on both Saturday and Sunday, like keeping it competitive, staying right there, capitalizing on the opportunities that came up. He just drove a nice race. I feel like that's what we were expecting from him this year, which is to come in and be reliable, be quick, maybe not be
5 places better than Hamilton, you wouldn't have expected.
No, I wouldn't have expected that. No, that's not. I don't think that's what people thought this season.
Yeah, he almost was too solid. Didn't get to see much George Russell because he was kind of just out there on his own for the majority of this. But Hazel, thank you so much for joining us. Can you let the people know the best place to follow you to find your work?
If you want to, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm H Southwell FE because I normally work in Formula E. You can keep up with my
tweets,
bad posts there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all right. We all got bad posts out there. You're an awesome follow. So thank you so much. We'll have to do this again sometime. But right now we're going to take a break. When we get back, we got some news to talk about.
But let's talk about Athletic Greens. If you're looking to get better gut health, more energy, stronger immune system in a really easy, natural way, you got to check out Athletic Greens.
That's good.
Or, AG, as us cool kids call it here on the podcast. I'm sure you'll all agree that most of us are not huge fans of having to take a bunch of pills or vitamins in the morning. You got breakfast to eat. You got to shower. There's no time to take all these pills. With Athletic Greens, you just found yourself an all-in-one solution that actually tastes good, and you'll truly enjoy getting your daily vitamins. So what is it? With one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food sourced superfoods, probiotics, adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, your recovery, your focus, your aging, all of the things. All of the things, all of the things, all of the things. To get this, Athletic Greens is a climate neutral certified company. Tass, I thought you'd like that part.
Yeah,
I included that
do
for
like that.
you here
Thanks.
today. In fact, in 2020, AG purchased carbon credits that support projects protecting old growth rainforests. So that's good stuff there. It's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. Just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you got to do is visit. Take a guess at what website you got to visit.
Athletic/nodunks.com/nodunks, no?
Athleticgreens.com/nodunks. I just want to see if you're paying attention to me. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/nodunks to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
We talk a lot about numbers and statistics and percentages here, so let me hit you with my favorite stat I've seen. 79% of men think about their balls every day.
What's the number?
79%. It's probably more like 100% once you mention it.
Exactly.
I think we're up to 100, but the standard percentage is 79%. There are 5 of us here on the show.
Right. So one of us is not?
I think it was Tass. I don't think Tass has yet. I'm not sure.
Just did.
Oh, somebody forget about it.
Okay. Hold on.
Somebody forget. Every day, 79% of men think about their balls.
Too low.
I agree.
What, your
you
balls?
mean the percent?
Oh.
Well, if your balls are too low,
Yeah.
they won't be if you wear Saxx underwear. The one brand that has made it their mission to keep your manhood supremely comfortable. Saxx is obsessed with the comfort of your manhood. Thanks, Saxx.
Sweet.
They make the most comfortable underwear for men, premium styles equipped with their patented ballpark pouch, which is basically a built-in hammock that keeps everything in place.
Oh.
You know what I say? It's a good day if you're in a hammock. There's no sticking or chafing. Chafing? Chafing? Same thing?
Close.
I mean, which do you say?
Ch.
Yeah.
Chafing. Just 24/7 comfort. Saxx makes underwear for all kinds of different occasions, even ones specifically for sport and outdoor activity. I wear Saxx when I play tennis. Balls in the pocket, balls in the pouch.
Yeah.
Very secure. If you want to try Saxx, head on over to saxx.com/nodunks to get 10% off plus free shipping by using promo code NODUNKS. They come with a comfort guarantee, so if you're not 100% satisfied with your new underwear, Saxx will give you your money back. So go to saxx.com/nodunks and use promo code NODUNKS for 10% off and free shipping.
Peloton, my old friend. That's a new drop around here. We love Peloton in this house. Every single one of us uses it pretty much every day. We originally got it for Rachel. She was having knee problems. She wanted something that was low impact. Got on the thing. She was immediately addicted and went on a 60-day ride streak. Like she did 60 days of rides.
Made it sound like she was on it for 60 straight days.
Yeah.
Wouldn't get off.
It felt like it.
Right.
It felt like it, to be honest. And we all use it. You should see Jackson's abs. The guy. It's crazy. Very jealous. I guess I could do the ab workouts too, but I don't. I do rides and weights, but I got to work on my core. Anyway, Peloton is pushing you further with so much new on the Peloton Bike and Peloton Bike Plus. New classes, new music, new ways to keep your workouts fun and motivating. I'm doing today a 45-minute Power Zone Endurance 90s ride with my girl Christine Dercole later. And I'm actually looking forward to it. That's true. And Lincoln's been dabbling with Peloton boxing. You don't need gloves or anything, really. We have a Bob over there that he likes to slap around. Sorry. Slap again. If you've never boxed before, these classes will have you working up a sweat while working on the fundamentals of form, footwork, and fun combos that will keep you on your toes. Peloton has a workout for every goal and mood. De-stress from a long day with 30 minutes of strength and 20 minutes of cardio, or do a quick 15-minute total body class before work. Stay motivated while having fun with bike workouts, yoga, meditation, dance cardio, and more. Visit onepeloton.com to learn more. That's ONEPELOTON.com.
Welcome back to No Breaks. We just recapped the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix with Hazel Southwell. Go follow her on Twitter at HSouthwellFE. Lots of great times with our guest, Graydon. A couple of things didn't make the recap, unfortunately. One thing, JD, that caught my ear when I was watching the race, there was a Coronation Street shout out at one point. They were talking about like the soap opera drama between the drivers, and they mentioned Coronation Street, and I was the Leo meme at that point. I was like, I've heard of that.
Yeah. What did they say? What was it?
I don't know. They're literally just like, oh, if it is a soap opera, if it is like Coronation Street,
Okay.
you know,
What is
ellipses.
what is Coronation Street?
What is Coronation Street? It's the longest running soap opera of all time. They're in their 61st season.
Is it an American?
No, it's a British
no. Okay.
daily
Right.
soap opera.
Okay.
And I dip in and out. It's one of my favorite shows. Legit one of my favorite shows.
Really? Well,
Absolutely.
So it's worth a watch. Can you
61
dip?
seasons,
Can
you
you
can
dip
catch
in and
up
out,
no
or do I have to go back to like season 1, episode
No,
1 to like get the story?
You have to dip in and out. It's too much. It's too much.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't catch that because if they said that, I would have had no idea what they were referring to.
Yeah, you have to have spent a few years in Canada or anywhere else in the Commonwealth to get another great quote from Crofty showing the Aston Martin pit wall, and he says, as we look at Mike Rack on the pit wall, there's an engineer named Mike Rack.
It's the new Mike Rack is the new Aston. I think he's the new Aston Martin principal.
Oh, he's the Aston Martin principal? That's awesome. So we're going to be looking at Mike Rack quite a bit.
Mike Rack is back. Yeah, he's going to be Mike Rack is going to be at every race.
Very exciting.
It's going to be visible at every race.
Yeah,
Mike
make
Rack.
sure to get your Saxx underwear, saxx.com. Promo code NODUNKS for a deal. But Graydon, as with any Formula One race, whole bunch of fallout afterwards. So we'll talk about some of the news. The first little piece comes from Autosport. After the race on Sunday, Charles Leclerc said, I think DRS needs to stay for now. Otherwise, the races would be very boring. Preseason, all the talk was about these new regulations making the cars able to follow closer, hopefully more overtaking, and hopefully at some point in the future, maybe we don't even need DRS. DRS has been awesome, though, so far. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I think he's right as far as this season goes. It's clearly, in fact, this is probably the optimal use of DRS, which is that it helps with overtaking, but it's not definitive of the race. It's not like you overtake the guy and off you go, which was oftentimes the case in the past. In this instance, guys are able to battle back, so that's the best case scenario for DRS. I still do think the goal, in my understanding, the goal is to iterate the cars to a point and the regulations to a point where DRS isn't needed for them to be able to overtake one another. And I think that is probably best because it feels to me more like necessary evil than like actual good, that you can like fabricate an additional 18 kilometers just on a straight or wherever, just out of thin air. It's probably, but I agree with him that at least for this year, it's making for terrific racing.
Yeah, it's added like just another little lever of strategy, really. Like we've seen it come up in both races so far between Verstappen and Leclerc, right? Like Leclerc was dummying Verstappen during the Bahrain GP, letting him pass twice just so that he could be ready to have DRS to do his overtake. He did it again in Saudi Arabia, but eventually Max caught on and he's like, no, I'm waiting for the second DRS straight. So I thought that was really cool how you're just like seeing even Verstappen, a guy who's been around for a little bit at this point, currently the champion, and he's out there learning as we're watching him. I think it's really cool. So I don't know how they do it where it's just straight up car versus car. They're not opening the wing, but right now DRS is definitely working for me.
Yeah. I don't think Leclerc's right as far. You'd have to see a lot of evolution from here. It doesn't seem like we're getting. These also haven't been Jeddah's a bad track to prove this. There are tracks where there are overtake points that aren't in DRS zones, too. It's like Jeddah is not one of them really. So it highlights the value of DRS, but the problem is there's a lot of tracks that's true of, where it's, there are plenty where you can overtake at various points, but there's a lot of them where DRS zones are really where your opportunity is. So it'll definitely be interesting for the ones where you see DRS zones in quick succession. I look forward to seeing this. For example, Brazil's another one where a great track, really exciting, but you see there's a DRS down the main straight and then another DRS zone right there in sector 1. How will people play that? Will they rather have gotten the overtake done? Will they hold off on the main straight? That seems crazy, but it's I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it evolves over the season.
Is this a dumb comparison? The DRS zone is the corner 3 of Formula One racing. Some people don't love it, but you got to take them. It's just smart.
I feel like it's almost I feel like the better comparison is it's like a 4-point play or something that, right? If we had like a little circle that you could shoot it.
We don't need it.
Yeah, hopefully we get to play.
Yeah.
Although, are you pro a 4-point play?
Honestly,
I don't mean
wrong podcast, Graydon. I can't talk basketball on this one.
No,
it's in the contracts. Actually, I am pro 4-point line, but only for this reason. I wouldn't have wanted to be the guy back in the 1970s who said no 3-point line.
Oh yeah, you don't want to go back.
You
don't want to be standing athwart history yelling stop.
But you know a lot about tracks, it sounds like. You're just rattling off where the DRS zones are at in Interlagos. So this one is going to throw you for a loop, Graydon. Next news come from Sky Sports F1 on Twitter. Formula One boss Stefano Domenicali has confirmed to Sky Sports F1 that Las Vegas and Africa could both hold races in the future, and says 30 Grand Prix in a season would be possible due to the level of interest in the sport. Too many races? 30?
It is a lot of races. I am going to say yes, it's too many. This isn't about whether the interest is there from the fans, which I think it is. And no doubt the sport is ascendant right now. And I do think there's tons of places that would love to host races. Are there 30 cities or 30 countries globally that would love to have a race? Yes, absolutely. You could probably have 3 or 4 in the U.S. We will have 3. You could probably still have another one in the U.S. and have plenty of interest. It's really about the guys who work at the races. It's not even the drivers. It's like the mechanics, the teams. These are really long, hard weeks for them. They can be sleepless nights. They can be, it's not as when the race is done, they just jet off home. It's like there's tons of work to be done back home at the factory to prep for the next race. The season is hard on these guys. And to just stack in more and more and more races, they're the ones that are slipping through the cracks here. Their well-being is the one that is the thing that's going under considered when Domenicali says things like this. That being said, I mean, I think that we tend to see sports leagues. This isn't unique to F1.
Right.
Do make decisions that are in the best interest of the financials, and it probably makes the most sense to add more races for them. It's almost certainly more revenue opportunities in a variety of ways. So I wouldn't expect it if we see more. At some point, is there a breaking point? Will teams and staff push back? The answer is yes. I just don't know where that is. I think it's somewhere before 30, but it's probably not at 25. They'll probably just deal with it for a minute, So
Yeah, we got 22 races on the calendar now, and there's already a bunch of back-to-backs or triple headers where it's like that's just a huge time you're gone, right? You're gone for 3 weeks straight, and it's like you finish the race on Sunday, you got to be there in the next country setting up by Monday to get ready for Friday. That's a big time commitment, no doubt about it. But man, in a Las Vegas race, that's gonna be cool.
It is going to be wild. It's going to be wild. I haven't seen. I don't even know if they have it. If they have like a layout of what the track's going to be like, I haven't seen it yet. But I do know. I think the thing we know is that the main drag will be the strip, or that is what the plans are. The intention is, which will be insane.
Yeah, and you said there are several places in the United States that can hold a race. Obviously, that's true. We've got Austin right now. We've got Miami added to the schedule. Theoretically, Las Vegas in the future. Where else?
I mean, so they used to have races in Long Beach, right? In that's one where I think people have talked about going back to there's a Watkins Glen up in the Finger Lakes in upstate New York is where they famously used to have like the US Grand Prix. Those are two areas where I don't know if you almost certainly would have to do some work on both those tracks, I think, to bring them up to current F1 standards. But those are two areas where I think fans have thought, should we go back there? The other big one that people talk about that was a bit of a nightmare, the last few times they're there, but is Indianapolis, is the Brickyard, where they race on the part of the oval and then part of the interior track, and that they have had U.S. Grand Prix there as well. So that's an area where they thought, should we go back there? Those are, I gotta presume, all in the conversation. Although,
isn't one of the biggest black eyes on Formula One at Indianapolis?
Yeah, it's like where tons of the cars were like failing. Yeah, I think that's probably why they don't go back there. It also seems like the current, maybe this is a little harsh, but certainly where they're having new races that they're adding, it feels like Dominicali and the current F1 administration don't care about the history of a place. Like, they're more than happy to go somewhere.
More like the party is important.
Yeah. So those three, the fact that those are places we've historically had races in the U.S. probably means nothing. Like, I would say that actually, like, they're just as likely to go to New York City or a new track in LA or something like that as they are
somewhere with really good vibes, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's about the vibes.
It's all about the vibes, because I think this final piece of news kind of goes hand in hand with more races. This is from thedrive.com. The 2022 Bahrain GP was ESPN's most watched Formula One race since 1995. Like you're saying, ratings go up, number of races goes up. Even the NFL is like, played a 16-game schedule for years and years. They're like, sorry, you're playing on Thursdays now. Yeah. We're playing on Saturdays now. And by the way, you got 17 games. So if people are watching, they're going to want to have more stuff to watch.
Totally. The fact that the Bahrain Grand Prix was the most watched race in almost 20 years, whatever, is way more than 20 years, actually. Sorry, almost 30 years, is insane. First of all, what was happening in 1995 that F1 was so popular and it was like it got such great ratings? I actually don't know what event caused that, but also that's just it's just wild. I think it's incredible what F1 did last season to get so popular, but I do agree, if they continue to put up those numbers, we'll see what they were for the Saudi GP, but if they continue to put up those numbers, the reality is they'll continue to host more races, and they'll be increasingly eager to have more and more races in the US. They'll want to have it's owned by Liberty Media. Not a lot of people realize this, but the actual owners of F1 are an American company, so like they are very eager to have as much interest in the United States as possible.
Well, I remember all the off track content we got from the Circuit of the Americas race last year. Like, Shaq showing up, Chris Bosch, I think, was riding around in a way too small vehicle at some point. They had like an hour-long pre-show of just celebrities hanging out on pit road, basically. So, I mean, if you're going to be putting them in Las Vegas and Miami, I think you're probably getting even more celebrities than there are in Austin. So I don't know. I guess the Netflix deal is coming up in not too long as well. So I'm curious to see how they will address that, because some of the drivers, obviously Verstappen, are not happy with the way it's gone down, the narrativization of the sport, if you will. But it's also bringing a lot of eyeballs and a lot of money to the sport.
I mean, that's a pretty big gap in terms of happiness there. I mean, I think the F1 itself, Domenicali, Stefano Domenicali has got to be thrilled with how Drive to Survive has gone. Liberty Media is thrilled. They don't have a single problem with what Drive to Survive has done. The drivers might, the teams might, but like they think it's a unmitigated success because from an audience generation standpoint, I mean, it's maybe unprecedented. I honestly can't remember the last time you just did kind of I don't want to call it a marketing stunt, but just such a naked, like, hey, let's produce some content and try to get people into it, and then it worked, and just magically millions and millions of people cared who didn't care but a couple of years ago. Yeah,
it'd be like suddenly if they just came out with a documentary and we're all into horse racing.
Yeah, totally.
Horse racing's back.
Yeah, now we're all obsessed. Like
what you got, Secretariat or Seabiscuit?
Yeah, hundreds of thousands of people flooding to the Belmont Stakes.
We're going crazy. To be 30 horse races.
Totally.
We're racing everywhere, but we're going to take one last break. Going to recap the standings from the first couple of weeks here. Take a quick look at the Australian GP. Stick around.
LinkedIn. One word or two?
I guess one.
Compound word?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Well, it can be both. Because LinkedIn, it can be whatever you need it to be. Looking for a job? That's the place to go. Hiring? Well, LinkedIn is the best place to find your next employee. With so many people switching jobs right now, LinkedIn Jobs is here to help you connect with the people you want to interview faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 770 million people. It's not a typo. That's a lot. Then add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know? Every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/nodunks. That's linkedin.com/nodunks to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
There are some things that keep getting better as you use them, like a cast iron skillet. When it's got all the many flavors of the things you've cooked on it and they marinate together. It's great. Or it could be, as it is for me, those trusty old pair of basketball shoes. I've been out playing again. It's the older ones that sometimes just make you feel more comfortable. And sometimes now you can actually add bed sheets to the mix. Boll Branch sheets aren't just buttery, breathable, and impossibly comfortable. They get softer with every wash. We got sent a pair a few weeks ago, or a set, and I immediately put them on because we hadn't actually had new bed sheets for a while. You sort of take it for granted, don't you? Just like put them in the wash and you keep using them. I tried these. It's great. Great, really. I mean, it really is buttery and breathable underneath there.
Yeah, sleeping well?
Absolutely, yeah. My wife loves them. So do I. We snuggle and it's like, it feels really nice. They're silky smooth and cozy, and you can just feel the difference between the old ones that we had been using. Boll Branch uses the highest quality threads on earth for a superior softness and a better night's sleep. Buttery, again, to touch.
You really roll your R's when you say it. Yeah.
Super breathable. They are perfect for every season. 100% free of toxins, meaning no pesticides, formaldehyde, or other harsh chemicals. I know. I was going to take it out, but I thought, no, I can do it.
Yeah, good.
Best of all, Boll Branch gives you a 30-night risk-free trial with free shipping and returns on all orders. You guys know, I love that. When a product says, take it for a month, Try
it.
Really try it out. Not just a week, and also free shipping and all that. So you got a free hit.
Put these sheets down. Snuggle with your wife.
Exactly.
Then
it's a
wash
great
'em.
feeling. Wash them.
Got to.
Put them down again.
Right.
Snuggle. You're back in town.
Right.
Great.
Back in town.
Get 15% off your first set of sheets when you use promo code. Guess what the promo code is?
Athletic Greens.
No dunks at bollandbranch.com. That's Boll and Branch. BOLLANDBRANCH.com. Promo code no dunks. 15% off your first set of sheets. Do it.
Welcome back to No Breaks. 2 races down in the Formula One season, and we're already taking a break. Makes me think 30 is maybe necessary. Our next race weekend, though, is April 8th through 10th in Australia, mate. So let's take a quick look at the standings here. On the driver's table, we got the Ferraris up top. Couple of podiums for both Leclerc and Sainz in our first 2 races. They're followed by Verstappen, Russell, Hamilton, Ocon, Perez, Magnussen, Bottas, and Lando Norris down in 10th. And we'll take a quick look at the constructors standings as well. Ferrari, they're back way up on top. 40-point lead over Mercedes, who had a great week 1, average week 2. Red Bull, nothing week 1, great week 2. Followed by Alpine in 4th, Haas, Alfa Romeo, Alfa Tauri, McLaren, and then Aston Martin and Williams are only 2 teams to have yet to score a point this season. So, Graydon, we're going to the Australia GP in a couple of weeks here. They've been racing there since 1996, but not since 2019 have we been back. So, Valtteri Bottas, the current defending champion out in Melbourne. What kind of track do we got here?
Melbourne's an interesting track. It's kind of like a partial road track. You can actually drive on parts of the track if you go to Melbourne. Because it goes to like a little park area there.
Cool.
What I'm most interested in about with this track is that it's a little bit famous for drivers having difficulty getting temperature into the tires because there's no long corners in it, which can be really helpful in that. And that is a big X factor this season in general. In general, getting temperature into the tires seems harder. It's something that guys are concerned about. I wonder if a safety car or something like that creates a lot of challenges. That's the thing I'm on the lookout for, is how are guys managing that. It's a pretty fast track beyond that, pretty fast and flowing beyond that. But I don't know. I think it's fun. It used to be the first race of the season every year, which I actually kind of liked. I thought it was fun, but whatever. I'm glad we're back. I'm glad that, it's the absence of Australia felt like an acute reminder of kind of COVID era reality, because we were there in 2019 and everything kind of shut down on short notice.
Right.
Just like, right before the race happened. So very excited that they were able to go back.
Seems like the big question for the title picture this year has been the configurations between the Red Bull car and the Ferrari car. Faster in the straights, generally, for Red Bull, if I'm not mistaken. Faster in the corners for Ferrari. So who's this going to favor in Australia?
I think it's got to favor the Red Bulls, right? It's a pretty high-speed course. I think you're at full throttle, probably roughly something like 70% of the course or something like that. So that's
not full throttle, my man. That's full beans.
Full beans. Yeah,
full beans there.
You're giving it all. You're giving it the beans about 77 out of the 10 seconds every.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, 70% of the time it's all beans. So
79% of men think about their balls every day. 77% of the time you're going full beans in Australia.
And then so that's almost certainly got a favorite Red Bull. Right?
Okay.
So I think that being said, Ferrari has even admitted that they probably over-indexed on downforce for their setup in Jeddah. It is possible. And they weren't that far off, right? I mean, it's not as if they got blown away.
Right.
So it is possible that a little bit of correction, shifting the setup slightly, and they could find a little bit better balance, be more competitive on the straights, and be right there. However, the track probably does favor Red Bull.
It's funny, too, because I saw some headlines that Red Bull was like, we see Ferrari's downforce, and we're like, that merits some consideration. So we shall see what these cars actually look like, because we'll be back right after the Australian GP. I guess that'll be August. I keep saying the A, and it's throwing me off. It's just April, guys. It's just April right now. April 12th, likely, is the next No Break show. JD going on vacation next week. We got no race, so we got nothing to talk about. Graydon, you always have something to talk about. Follow him at Mr. Gordian on Twitter. It's the best place to find Turning Red tweets. Is this good? Good movie?
I liked it. I had fun with it. Yeah, I thought it was great.
You think it's good for a
time.
7-year-old?
I think it might be. I think it deals with some preteen, early teen themes. It might be
seems to be the case.
just beyond a 7-year-old.
Yeah, we got to do the Scout Watch. Laura
I think
and I've been talking about.
if your name is if your age is like 2 digits, then
Okay.
you're into the Turning Red window.
This one is a 2-digit watch. Thanks for the info. You can find us at No Dunks Inc. anywhere and everywhere on the internet. That's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, wherever. Send us, me and Graydon, Formula One emails at nodunks@theathletic.com. You can subscribe to The Athletic at theathletic.com/nodunks for just $1 a month for the next 6 months. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, you already found our new YouTube channel. If you're listening to it on the podcast, you found the podcast feed. But if you're watching on YouTube, go subscribe to the podcast. If you're listening to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube. And if you just found one of them, thank you for finding us. We will be back in a couple of weeks here. Maybe we can get Lee here as a guest on the show, the Australian GP in Melbourne. Why not? Clipper Bros.
You heard it here first. Have a great time. Turn up. Love you guys. Awesome.
Stay speedy, people. Vroom, vroom.